So you get disfellowshipped, and your dad tells you you have 30 days to get out of the house. You talked to us last time a little bit about those 30 days, but what was that last morning like when you woke up?
So memory and your brain are so funny, right? Like I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but I can remember vividly an event from 22 years ago. I remember waking up in the bedroom that I grew up in and walking outside, and my house was empty. Everybody was gone. And on my table there was a envelope, and inside was, my dad always wrote on yellow legal notepad, like that was his go-to paper always. And in it was a letter and had the pictures that he had of me on his desk. He had all of us. He had his favorite pictures of us. And he wrote me a letter to just tell me how disappointed he was in me, in that I had made this decision and I had let Jehovah down and I had broken the family, and that I was no longer his daughter, and that I was to take these pictures and hold on to them until I had come to my senses, and then he would take me back. And I held on to that letter until we moved from New York. It was in my jewelry box. I remember we were married and we were cleaning up our apartment, and I still had it, and I was like, what am I doing with this? And I don't know if it was just something subconsciously that I held on to, of my worth and how I had let my family down. I remember I saw my neighbor across the street. I had a garbage bag of stuff, and she asked me where I was going. I said, I don't live here anymore. And I just shut my door and I left. And that was the morning. No one was there. It was just an empty house with a letter from my dad.
Hello again, and welcome to episode 2 of our podcast, Just Wondering, Growing Up and Leaving the Jehovah Witnesses. I'm your host, Paul, along with my lovely wife, Lydia.
Hi.
Hi. We just want to say thank you to our listeners. We've had some great feedback since our first episode launched, and we're excited to bring you episode 2.
Yeah.
So last episode, we talked a lot about Lydia's childhood growing up and some things that happened throughout her life that ultimately led to her disfellowship and moving out of her house. And when we left off the last episode, you had just been disfellowshipped. Your dad told you needed to tell your brothers and sisters what had happened, and he told you that you had 30 days to get out of the house. So let's talk a little bit about that 30 days and what that was like.
Yeah, so I told them it was really hard to tell them. I remember everyone was really emotional. And then I went to sleep, and the next day I just knew that the hard work was done. And when I say that, it's weird, right? Because I knew that I had to figure out how I was going to get an apartment at 19. I didn't have a car. I had literally just started my first big, adult job. I wasn't making a lot. When you're 19, you hear your salary and you divide it by 52 weeks. And then I remember getting my first paycheck, and I looked at it. I was like, that's not what I said I was going to make, right? Because taxes, health insurance, all that stuff. So I very quickly realized that my $300 paycheck a week and was not going to be enough. So I knew I needed to get a second job. So I knew that this was going to be hard, but the harder part was telling my family. Mm-hmm. Once I did that, I knew that I could do the other things, because I had done the hard thing already. It was breaking my family's hearts. It was destroying my family in my parents' eyes, right? I went to work the next day, and this was really when I started to just kind of compartmentalize and follow my mantra of fake it till you make it. I knew that I couldn't fall apart. I had a job and I needed to keep that job. So I went to work. No one knew the wiser. And the next thing was I needed to get an apartment. So this was before the days of I think Craigslist was a thing back in 2004, maybe? I don't know. I remember getting the penny saver and looking through apartments, and I found one, and it was about a mile from where my house was that I grew up in. I went and I met him. It was a nice couple. It was a married couple. They had kids. It was a basement apartment. And I remember he asked me how old I was. And in my head, I'm going, I can't tell him I'm 19. So I told him I was 21. So I lied, but I knew that I kind of needed to, because I needed to get this apartment. It was in my budget. It was $800 a month. It's exactly what I needed. And he said, okay, I need first and last month's security. So I'm like, $1,600, you're making $300. Like I did not know how this was going to work. Every single penny needed to go to getting an apartment. I just kept every single penny, and I got a night job. So I worked from 8 to 5. And then from 6 to 9, I went to a collection agency. And oddly enough, there was quite a few Jehovah's Witnesses that worked there that I was friends with. So that was fun, right? Because I had to work with people that couldn't talk to me, right? It was very awkward, but I did what I needed to do. The other thing that I needed to figure out was my car situation. I had no car. And my dad said, well, we have this car that you can take. The only problem is it's stick. And I had no idea how to drive stick. So he said, you need to figure out how to drive it and you can have it. So my boyfriend taught me how to drive stick, which was fun. It was a Geo Metro red hatchback. I swore it ran on hamsters. The wheels were the size of our children's bikes, but it got me from here to there. Job secured, car secured. Now I needed to move into my apartment. And I quickly realized I had nothing. I had a mattress and a dresser. And I said to my brother, can you please help me move this into my apartment? And he said, fine, I'll do that, because I had like no other way of doing it. So during those 30 days, I did live at home. I didn't eat meals with them. I just stayed in my room. I went to work and I came home. So it started on September 10th. So October 10th, I moved out. And again, I remember those dates, and my dad wasn't messing around. Like I had 30 days and I knew it wasn't like October 10th would come around and he'd be like, yeah, you can say a few more weeks. I knew that was like done. I was finished. I had to just literally save every single penny that I had. Yeah, I was really lucky in regards to that. My boyfriend's family was really accepting of me. They kind of became like I guess you could say my second parents. I remember going to garage sales with his dad. He loved going to garage sales, and I grew up going to them. So we would find like stuff for the apartment and he'd be excited. Like, oh, look, we found this for you, Lyd. I was thankful for that, because when you leave, a lot of the times people just go back because they don't have, it's so sudden that you go from having family and love and community to not. And outside of them, I didn't really have a community. I would have dinner over there. I would spend the holidays. I celebrated my first birthday with them, right? Because my birthday was a month later.
You can understand why it's so hard for people to leave, because they literally lose everything that they had built up because it was all tied to the religion.
I remember they make an announcement at the congregation. So on Tuesday nights, they have a special needs talk where they announce that so-and-so is disfellowshipped. And then they have a talk after, which they claim it's not connected to the announcement, but it's about what you did. So in my case, they would have talked about having, worldly association, relationships, premarital sex, things like that. So everybody in the congregation knew what happened. And most of the time people go. And I remember my mother saying to me in the house, your announcement's on Tuesday night, you're coming, right? And I said, why would I go? And she said, you need to show that you have some sort of remorse for what you did. And I said, I don't have remorse for what I did. You're judging me and they're kicking me out for me being honest, right? For me being a 19-year-old person that just wants to live her life. Why am I going to go sit there and have people stare at me and feel bad for me? I don't feel bad for me. And my mom was very upset that I did not go to the meeting. They all went and they sat there. I remember them coming home from the Kingdom Hall that night, and my mom was really upset with me and just in general. My dad, like I said in the previous episode, we never really had a great relationship. We struggled there, but my mom really was my best friend. So that was hard.
So your dad told you had 30 days to get out, because at that point he assumed you weren't going to make amends.
Yeah.
If you had gone to that meeting, or if you had said to them immediately, I've thought about this, or a few days later, I've thought about this and I want to stay in the religion, was that an option? And what would that have looked like if you had decided within the 30 days that you didn't want to leave being a witness?
So I don't know what my parents would have done, right? My parents were very traditional Jehovah's Witnesses. They were by the book. Like there wasn't really any grace given. But there is a level of repentance where sometimes the sin is so great that you have to get disfellowshipped as like a punishment, right? The goal is to keep the congregation clean. And if people are allowed to engage in gross misconduct in their eyes without any sort of repercussions, that's a bad look for the rest of the organization, right? It's almost like an example to the other people. Mm-hmm. So during those 30 days, if I all of a sudden said to my parents, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I shouldn't have done this, maybe they would have let me stay, but I would have still had to go to all the meetings and no one would talk to me. You're shunned. No one would look at you. No one would smile at you. No, nothing. The only people that could talk to me would be my family at the Kingdom Hall, and even then I don't know if they would. So that's a period of time you need to go through where you need to show your repentance. And it's on the low end, 6 months, where you are attending all the meetings and then you're meeting with the elders in congregation and you're going through Bible study and scripture to talk about why you're sorry. It's kind of like a reprogramming, a re-education piece of things. I would like to think in my heart that if I said that to my parents, they would have showed me some compassion. But I don't know because that wasn't my experience.
Okay. So you go through the 30 days, you move out, you've got your apartment, you get your second job. What do those first few months out look like? How far away were you from where your parents were? Were you still in the same circles? What did that look like? Did you ever run into them?
So that was the weirdest thing. My apartment was about a mile from my parents. Same grocery store, same Target, same banks. I mean, I could run to my parents' house. I could walk to my parents' house. It wasn't far at all. Oddly enough, I never saw them. I just didn't. And I don't know if that was the universe, helping me a little bit. I did have interactions with them, though, when, big life things came up. Every time he went into the hospital, I would get a phone call from either my brother or my mom to say that Dad's in the hospital. That was hard because I loved my father, whether our relationship was tumultuous or not. I wanted him to be well, and I knew how much my mom loved him, and I know the toll that it took on her. So I would show up at the hospital. I would support my mom the ways that I could by answering the phone and asking questions and staying in the loop. But I never really got involved in it. It was more just like, hey, just to let you know, Dad's in the hospital. He's having a procedure. Or every phone call, as the years went by, they got more serious and more dire until he ended up getting a heart transplant. We weren't together at that point, no?
I think that was right before we got together.
Yeah, I didn't think you were.
This is almost, 10 years after you moved out?
Yeah.
So you are having no interaction with them. They're not calling to check in on you, making sure you're surviving. They're updating you on major life events. A few months after we were together, we ran into Lydia's parents at her grandmother's assisted living.
Yeah.
And we'll dive into that more, but I remember that had I not known anything about the story, I might not have thought too much about it. They said hello. They introduced themselves to me. It was very cordial. But the crazy thing was that after that interaction, it was back to not knowing you at all.
And I tried to keep it cordial. I don't know. Growing up, especially as a girl in that religion, it's a very male-dominated religion. The brothers, it's the submissive wife. It's the women are in submission to the men. So I was raised that way. I was raised to not question. I was raised to listen to my father. But the men run the show. I didn't want to ruffle feathers. I just really wanted to put this 2 decades of my life behind me and create this new life for me. I knew it was going to be hard and a lot of hard work, but I didn't want to embarrass them. I didn't want to bring hurt to them. And that was the thing that was always really hard for me in my brain. I know by doing what I did, I hurt them, but in my core, I wasn't doing it to hurt them. I was doing it to make me happy because I could have easily said, yeah, I'm going to stop everything I'm doing. I'm going to stay in this. And I would have gotten married a couple of years later and probably had some kids. But knowing who I am now, I know I would have been miserable. I can't wrap my head around staying there. So I talked about how my extended family was not in the religion. Obviously, they knew I moved out. So I remember talking to my aunt, and she was like, well, why are you moving out? I said, well, it's time for me to spread my wings. Like, I was very nonchalant about it. I didn't want to put an unnecessary strain on my mom and her sister's relationship. I didn't want to put a strain between my mom and her mom, right? My grandma. I wanted to just do what I needed to do and be okay and be happy, right? And that didn't mean shining a light on the trauma that essentially my family put on me, right? Because of the decision I made. And I don't think I'm very close, with my aunt, and I don't think she knew for several years actually how bad it was or the true story, because I just kind of kept it from everybody. I didn't want everybody to know. I think there was a level of shame around it. Even though I was happy I left, I still felt very ashamed.
Well, I think you mentioned the letter that your dad left you. He made a point to let you know how disappointed they were.
Right.
So I'm sure on some level you carried that consciously, subconsciously, and you weren't looking to do anything more to them. You felt as much as you needed to leave, you didn't want to compound it by making it harder for them. So even in leaving, you still
I tried to just bow out and be done, right? And like, okay, they'll move on and forget it. And in my heart, I was like, they will move on. A couple years will go by, things will get better. I remember because here's the thing, when I left, my dad was very clear that he felt I was leaving for my boyfriend. He could not wrap my head that I did not want to be a Jehovah's Witness, that I did not align with it anymore. So he said, this boy is going to break up with you. He's going to break your heart, or he's going to get you pregnant, or you're going to get addicted to drugs. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, what in the world are we talking about here? Like, I'm not going to get addicted to drugs, Dad. Like, come on. Right. Like, I know better. Well, we did break up. And that was heartbreaking. It was my first heartbreak. And I was dealing with it alone.
How long after you moved out was this?
I want to say it was a year or two. But he became my world, right? Like, he was my person. I felt like I had found my unconditional love that I did not have from my parents. Because being a parent is unconditional love, right? You love your child no matter what. And I thought I had that. I realized I didn't. So then I was with somebody else and I said, oh my God, like, I love him so much. And then we broke up and it was fine, right? Like, he wasn't my person, obviously. I'm married to you. But that was hard. And I remember I called my mom and I was having like a panic attack on my couch. And she said, Lydia, I can't do anything for you. You did this. You caused all of this. I love you, but I can't help you. And she just hung up on me. That was hard because I was like, oh my God, I'm like falling apart on the phone and she doesn't even want to show me any sort of like love. She was just so cold to me. And that for years, I just was like, if I show them how good I'm doing, how I'm not addicted to drugs, how I'm not like have 6 babies by all these different, you know what I mean? Like, and it never was enough. I mean, when we finally got married and we decided to move, I had the same apartment and the same job for 13 years. I tried to show how steady I was and to make them proud, but nothing made them proud. And that was hard because I thought eventually time would heal wounds because time healed my wounds. I grieved them like they died when I moved out because they did. They died in my mind. And every day got a little easier. When it all happened to me, it was so overwhelming. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And if one person could hear this and say, I can do this too. Like, I'm going to put myself first. And yeah, it's going to be really hard. And there's going to be a lot of sacrifices. But looking back, I would go through it all over again to get to where I am today.
And I know we talk openly about this with people, but you went to therapy for a number of years to work on this. It wasn't it wasn't simply just a time makes everything easier. You had to put in a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about how my motto was fake it till you make it. To a level, I did like disassociate from it, right? I really do view my life in two segments, from birth to 20 and from 20 to now. Like I live two separate lives and they do not align in any way. So in order for me to not become depressed and not and go to work, like I needed a job, I needed to work. I just put those problems away and I pretended they weren't there. And as time went by, it got easier. But then when I got a phone call from my brothers, or I got a phone call from my mom about my dad, it would spiral me. I would have those thoughts of how I hurt them and how I'm not there and what a crappy person I am. I always was like in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, when I get married, I'll feel better. And yes, that made me feel better, but it didn't heal me. And I was like, okay, when I become a mom, that's it. Like my heart's going to be complete again. And I remember becoming a mom and looking at him, and I literally wanted to explode with the love that I had for this child that I just met. And I became even more confused because I can't wrap my head around a world where I do not have him in my life every single day. And he can disappoint me, he can hurt me, he can make bad choices, but I will have his back always. And I realized that my parents did not love me ever the way that I loved my child. And that's when I realized that if I wanted to be a good mom, I had to really go into the closet and dig out that crap and work on it. And I found a few therapists and nothing was really working. And then I found one. It was so life-changing. It was so painful, but it was so healing in that I didn't carry that shame and that hurt and that a shame anymore. It was really shame and anger. And when I let go of that, it was so freeing. But that took me 20 years. That's how much the first 20 years of my life hurt me. And there are so many people in this organization that are living with doubts and just pushing them away, saying, oh, it's Satan testing me. But no, that's your heart telling you that this is not where you belong. But I would lose my family all over again to get where I am now. And I would make that decision over and over and over again. Because if I did not, I would not be the mom I am today. I would not be the wife. I would not be the friend that I am today because of it.
Thank you for making me cry.
I didn't think I was going to cry too. I haven't cried in a long time.
I've lived through this, and yet I still get emotional when you talk about it, because I do remember when our son was born, you realize how much you love that individual that you've known for 2 seconds, mm-hmm. and how unconditional it is. And then to instantly make you realize, how am I living in a world where my mom isn't talking to me, where my mom is pretending that I don't exist?
Yeah.
And if anything, it just gives you insight that you didn't have before. Unfortunately, though, the insight just makes it worse.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily make it better. It makes it worse. I always talk about how strong you are, but I can't imagine having gone through that and have that realization hit you. Let's go back a little bit. You mentioned that your father had been sick and had heart issues and ultimately got a heart transplant. You had also mentioned in the last episode that you needed a blood transfusion.
Yeah.
And you can remember your mom saying she can't get blood. It's against the religion to receive a blood transfusion. I'm curious if you can talk us through, because this has always fascinated me. You weren't allowed to get a blood transfusion, but your father was allowed to get a heart transplant.
So the funny thing about the religion, the witnesses, is that their stance on things changes quite often. They'll come out. So the way it's organized, it's the organization, and then there's a governing body, and it's a group of guys No women, only men. Bunch of old men. And I think there's 13. They are like top echelon, and they are the ones that are like in direct communication with Jehovah. I think they're considered anointed, they're called. I think, don't fact check me on that, where they're just getting like direct comms from the guy upstairs. You can't get whole blood, but you can get fractions of blood because they don't consider that blood. So if they were to put your blood in a centrifuge and spin it up and all the separates, you could get pieces of it. And that's essentially what I got when I did get treatment. I got a factor to allow my blood to produce more rapidly. Instead of just putting blood into me and I would be fine in a couple days, it took about 3 months for my blood supply to build up. So I was ill for the entire summer. Now, my dad, because he had heart issues, I mean, it pumps the blood. That is the job of the heart, right? So there are hospitals that do bloodless surgery because there are medical opinions that blood is a foreign body, right? If I get blood from you, even though we match, it's still not mine, and that it can lead to complications. There are studies that it can lead to delayed healing, things like that.
Just for clarity, those aren't the reasons that you're not allowed to receive blood.
Correct.
Can you tell us?
The reason why is because I believe it's the book of Acts. It says that once blood is spilt, it is unclean. They view it as once it leaves your body, it is no longer clean. But if it leaves your body and stays in a tube that goes into a machine that then gets filtered back into your body, that's fine. So that's how they do bloodless surgeries. So my dad got a heart. I still don't understand because the heart has blood on it. So I don't know if they cleaned it. I didn't ask these questions. We're not doctors. But I know that like he was hooked up to a machine that any blood that was lost went into a bank and got basically cleaned and put back into his body. So since it never touched the air, it wasn't unclean. Mm-hmm. And that's how they got around it. I got a call from my mom and she said the dad is, I feel like it's like Denny from Grey's Anatomy. He had an LVAD, like he wasn't leaving the hospital until he got a new heart. And I was like, oh crap, because in my head, like that's a really go buy a lottery ticket. Like I was like, well, my dad's gonna die, right? Like this isn't. Yeah. Wasn't very long, couple days. And I got another call and I was like, oh no, he died. And it was, I forgot who called me, but he got a heart. And they would like me to come to the hospital. The hospital was in Brooklyn, New York, so it was not close. I think I took off from work, drove in. And again, this is like goes back to like core memories that are just ingrained in your brain. And I felt like I was in a movie. The doors open up at the hospital and there's 3 waiting rooms when you see it. My mom is like dead center and there are witnesses everywhere. I mean, covered, swarming. And then the vestibule next to her, the waiting room next to her, I recognize her, but I can't like put my name, like I can't connect it because I'm kind of in this like weird moment where I'm like unsafe, right? There's witnesses everywhere.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. And she says to me, Lydia? And it was a girl we went to high school with. And you could tell she's crying. And I said, oh my God, like, what are you doing here? And she's like, my dad just died. And I was like, she's like, what are you doing here? And I said, my dad just got a heart. And in that moment, I saw the pain she was experiencing. And I felt so guilty that my dad got a heart because her entire family was there and just are experiencing this immeasurable loss. And I haven't seen my dad in years. And I see my mom, she gives me a big hug. And I'm just like, is he okay? Like, it's like numb, right? Like, I don't know what's going on. And she's like, if you want to go see him, you can. And let me just tell you, like, Grey's Anatomy does not prepare you for this stuff because when people get transplants at Grey's Anatomy, they're like talking and they're fine. He was not fine. He was like hooked up to machines. He had a big scar down his chest. And I mean, he looked unwell. And I thought I was going to throw up. That this is how I was seeing my dad, like in this such a vulnerable state. And then I left and no one talked to me. No one asked me if I was okay. They just looked at me and looked away. And I was like, oh my God, that's my dad. He made me. And you're not going to like even acknowledge my existence, that I'm here? They didn't. It was about a year-ish. I got another phone call and it was my brother. And he said that dad died. He was at home and he had a heart attack. He just stood up and he said, Sue, I don't feel good. And by the time he hit the ground, he was dead. And he said, I think you should come to the house. Mom's asking for you, which looking back is like the most selfish thing. And I think I'm still kind of angry at her for that because I needed you so many times. And you said no. I dropped everything. I drove over there. She's there. She gives me a big hug. She's crying. And I said, where is he? And she's like, he's in the back room. I don't want you to go back there. I said, no, I'm seeing him. Like, this is the last time I'm going to see my father. I have like things I need to say to him. And I can picture his face. I know what I said to him. It was not very nice because I was mad that this is how, like, we're all going to die, right? I said to him, like, you got a new lease on life. You took somebody's heart. Somebody lost their son, their father, I don't know who the donor was, so you could live. And you did not take any opportunity to change anything.
Because in that time, from when he got the heart, nothing changed in your relationship.
No.
You can't even call it a relationship. But he never reached out.
Never reached out. I people would say to me, right, well, I mean, surely your dad is going to be like, wake up from this, right? Because they could have a relationship with me. It wouldn't be ideal, but they could. Right? There's I don't even want to say in the scriptures, in the book that the governing body says, it is a decision that you make about immediate family members. If it was your aunt or your cousin, no, like that's not immediate. But like father, daughter, like that's a decision you make, whether or not you want to engage. And they made that decision every day to not engage with me. And yeah, he died. And my mom asked for me to stay, and the house filled up with witnesses and more witnesses. And I was there for way too long. And then she asked me to stay the night because she didn't want to be alone. I knew in my head that this was a bad, bad thing to do. But in my heart, I was like, this is my mother and I love her. And she just lost like the love of her life. So I stayed there, and Sarah and my sister did too. I slept in my childhood bedroom because they had turned it into their like master. And I woke up next to my mother in my childhood bedroom for the first time in 15 years. And I thought I was going to vomit. Like I was unwell. I had a complete, like I went cold. Like I did not know. And I just got up and ran out. She called me and she asked me to come back. So a few hours later, once I composed myself, I went back. I drank too much wine and it really went sideways.
You mentioned that witnesses, showed up and they were all at the house. They were all there to mourn your father, to support your mom, your brothers, but they didn't talk to you.
No one ever said, I'm sorry that your dad died. I'm sorry that you guys were so estranged. I mean, we weren't estranged. We had no relationship, right? Nobody. Not one person. And when I say people that were my best friends, childhood best friends, just walked by and didn't even make eye contact with me.
It's no wonder the day got away from you a little bit.
Yeah.
As far as your mindset. And I remember when I finally got there in the late afternoon, there were a couple of friends that were there that you knew from outside the religion that came to support you. But you were a mess emotionally.
Yeah.
You continued to stay and I was there with you, and Sarah ended up coming as well. I don't know how you did it. I wouldn't have lasted nearly as long as you did. And I think this goes again back to you put the needs of your mom ahead of your own.
Which was how I was raised.
Right. And you weren't looking to add to that. So instead you dealt with it on your own and internalized it. But eventually the day got away from you and you could no longer internalize it anymore. It ultimately led to you and us leaving.
Yeah.
I don't want to say there was a scene.
No, I think I just started to get emotional. I think the reality of it started to really hit me. I left, and I remember getting in the car, and I remember feeling so numb and so spiraling out of control that I just started smashing my head up against the window.
Yeah, you were banging your head against the window pretty hard.
Because I needed to feel something, because I was a mess. And then I still went to the Kingdom Hall for my father's funeral talk, sat with my family. Nobody said anything to me. Again, the funeral talk wasn't about my father. It was about, there's fresh meat in the congregation.
It was literally a recruitment video.
Yeah.
Instead of talking about her dad, it was about being a witness, and it was recruitment. I mean, that's the only word that I can use. It was preaching to anyone that was there who wasn't in the religion but was there to honor Joe. This is what we're about. Come join us.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest experience of my life.
Yeah, because you really didn't have a lot of interaction with it. Like, you had the interaction when you first met my parents, where I was like, oh, you're going to meet mom and dad.
Very limited. I mean, 5 minutes.
Yeah. And then it was...
I got to know them a little bit while your grandmother was alive, because we would run into them there. And then when your grandmother passed, and the funeral and everything that was involved in that, I got to be in the room with them a few times and talk to them a little bit. And they loved me. I mean, why wouldn't they?
But even that, right? Like, so my grandfather passed away before my grandma. And my mom was she was there at the funeral, and she stayed for the priest, sat next to my grandmother, and she held her hands. And I was surprised she stayed for the priest, because they believe that anything that is not Jehovah's Witnesses is considered false religion. And it is detrimental, and you do not, any religion outside of Jehovah's Witnesses. I just assumed when my grandma died, the same thing would happen. She left. She left when the priest came, because she didn't have anybody to show off for anymore, right? She didn't have my grandma sitting there. She didn't have to save face. So once the priest walked in, my grandmother was Catholic. She just got up and excused herself. She wasn't there for her sister, because they inherently just care about themselves and the religion. You got to keep that bubble intact.
Well, and yeah, because when I jokingly said that they loved me, like you said before, I was fresh meat.
Yeah.
Right.
And they did try to.
They preached to me on any time that I was with them. They talked to me about essentially the merits of being a witness. It was very superficial. They really didn't care about me. They didn't really care about us. There's this guy here who doesn't know about what it is to be a witness, because I'm sure Lydia never told him. So let me use this opportunity to tell you about us. That was in those limited interactions when we decided to get married, and we were sending out wedding invitations, even though we knew that they would not come to our wedding. Once again, we did the respectful thing, and we sent them an invitation. We got I don't remember if it was a call or a text, but they asked us to come by. And I don't know if we maybe on some level thought maybe there was a chance that they were going to come, and that's why they invited us over. But it was to tell us that they wouldn't be at our wedding. Yep. They used the opportunity again to preach to me. Yeah. And talk about all the great things about being a witness, and I really should look into it.
Remember, my dad said, I don't know what Lydia has told you. And I'm like, told you?
It is funny. You talk about core memories, but I remember sitting in the sunken den in the back of your house. I think that was the first time I'd ever been in your house, the house you grew up in. And yeah, they were just talking to us about the fact that they wouldn't be at our wedding and why. And you know, if you want to be a witness, come sign up. And then it was shortly after that your dad ultimately passed. And he wouldn't have come to our wedding, but he ended up passing away before we even got married. He didn't use that time to make any type of change in regards to you. Yeah. He just kept on going and doing the same things that he normally did.
And I showed up for them in ways that I could. I showed up for my mom when she needed me. I always answered the phone when they called me. I never asked for anything in return. I didn't call my mom every day saying begging her, right? I called her that one time after my boyfriend broke up with me. And I just thought that, like, as time went on, things would get better. And I thought that, because you always hope that something would flip a switch. Thought maybe meeting you, right? Seeing that I had a really good partner. And then I was like, well, when I'm a mom. And that's why I kept the door open. She got pictures of Ethan when he was born, and he looks just like my dad. And when we went back to New York the summer after he was born, I knew that I really wanted her to meet him, because he is innocent of all of this, right? He didn't make any decisions. He's a 9-month-old that just happens to have a mom who's disfellowshipped 12 years ago. So I said, I want to go to the house, and you were super supportive of it. And we went over there. My mom, is the first time she's seeing me as a mom. Her first thing she says to me was, oh, you lost all the baby weight. And I remember in the back of my head going, you've got to be kidding me. Really? Like, that's where we start? And then I give her Ethan, and I'm like, oh my God, something's going to happen. And nothing happens. It was like she met a baby at the mall. he was cute, and she snuggled him a little bit. I mean, I'm glad I have those memories.
It was a very pleasant interaction. I mean, it wasn't cold.
No.
It was very warm. Your brothers were there. They got to meet him, or at least Caleb and Sam were there. It was a very nice day, but just like any other time we ran into them, it was that period of time, and then we were gone.
And it was done.
And it was like it never happened.
Yeah.
It was just going back to having no existence as far as they were concerned. I think it's probably a good time right now as we finish up this episode. We haven't talked about Sarah because that was different than everything that happened with your parents and your brothers. So let's go there a little bit. You leave and there's no interaction. Sarah is 2 years younger than you. Yeah. So you're 19, she's 17, she's still in high school. What was that like? Because you two were close growing up, obviously, the only 2 girls out of 5, close in age. Talk about a little bit about what it was like with Sarah immediately after, and what that relationship looked like over the time since you've left.
I mean, we were super close growing up. We shared a bedroom. We were only just 2 years apart, so we were kind of growing up together. I was always really protective of her. We always had very different personalities. I was always the baking cookies and cooking dinner type of sister, and my little sister was kind of the crazy little sister.
Still is.
But we love her. And then I left, and it didn't exist anymore for a little while. And then Sarah started to kind of have some back and forth, I think, internally. I wasn't really part of it because I was out. But anytime she did need a place to land, or she left, or was questioning things, my door was always open to her. So she lived with me a few times, or we would hang out and we would talk. But I missed her tremendously. And then she did end up leaving the religion. And I always said, like, I had nobody when I left, so I would never leave you. I truly wanted her to succeed so badly in life. We also weren't given the tools to have healthy, meaningful relationships. So we were always very competitive with each other, right? For my father's attention, my mother's attention, who was the better daughter, right? Like, that's not how you should be building a relationship. So in our 20s, there was a lot of turmoil and growing pains, and it stunk. But that thing that always was there is that we really did love each other. It took time, but I'm so thankful that I have her, because I do have cousins and aunts and uncles and all of that. But to have a sister that grew up in the same house that I did and can empathize and even laugh at stories, right? Like there's something about like having some sort of peace about that, like having those memories and being able to share them with somebody. Because really, when I left, nobody knew me from 0 to 20. Nobody knew any funny stories about me because they were not part of it. But we both needed to do the work to get to a healthy place, and it's taken time. Yeah, she left, I think by the time she was 24, 25, I think she was out. I'm not 100% of the timeline, but she was in our wedding. She's super involved in the boys' lives. I'm very grateful for that. And a lot of people don't have that. So I count that as like a blessing that I do have that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, she left New York and moved out here. Like you said, has been super involved in our lives. I will say the one thing that you always say to me is, as much as you needed to get out and didn't want to be a part of the religion anymore, when you look back at your younger years, you don't look back at them negatively. Mm-hmm. You look back at the religion negatively, but not your family. You've never said anything bad about having a bad childhood or anything like that. And so all these years later, to at least still be able to have a relationship with your sister, I know has always been very important to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Important to me too, Sarah. So I think we'll leave it at that for today. We touched on a lot of what happened to you and what you experienced after leaving the witnesses. Over the next few episodes, we'll start to dive into some more stories and do a little bit longer format on smaller things and try not to jump around so much in the timeline. But we really felt like over the course of the first 2 episodes, we wanted to give everyone a pretty high level view of what Lydia went through throughout her journey over the last 41 years.
I'm 27 still.
Next episode, we'll dive into some of those stories. I've talked to Sarah a little bit, and I think she'll be joining us in the coming episodes as well. So we look forward to that. Mm-hmm. But for now, we will bid you adieu, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Lydia.
Bye.